podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
I think we're bereft of news again, aren't we?
Yeah, I guess we haven't got much X-Files related going on in the wilder world at the moment. Other than, of course, there's still tickets available for FileFest, and I think also the Saratoga Springs 30th anniversary event that's coming up in September.
You too can still send us over there if you want.
Yeah, I would love for someone to pay to go to FileFest in particular.
But for now, we're stuck here, so...
We've still got our Patreon going, though, if
We've
anyone's interested in watching our Let's Play of the 1990s FMV game of the X-Files.
Part 2 coming soon?
Yeah, maybe even by the time this episode's aired, though I'm not going to say that for definite because I kept making that mistake last time.
Check on Twitter, I'll have the confirmation.
Yeah, if you keep an eye on Twitter, if you back us at any level on Patreon, you'll get access to, certainly at the moment, our first episode with our second either up or soon to follow.
Hooray. In the meantime, then, I think we shall migrate over to episodes. So, first up this week, we have Revelation. Directed by David Nutter, written by Kim Newton, and first broadcast on the 15th of December 1995. And you'll like some of these guest stars.
I remember a couple of them, I think.
First up, we have Kevin Zegers, who played Kevin Kreider, who was the boy in The Mouth of Madness. The one on the bike.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He was in Air Bud.
That the dog playing basketball?
It is. And the sequel. He was in Mortal Instruments City of Bone as Alec Lightwood. I don't remember who that is, but we've seen that film.
Mortal Instruments?
No.
Is that the Cassandra Clare
one? That's the Cassandra Clare one.
I've certainly seen it.
The one where we sort of said, look, here's Draco Malfoy, here's Harry Potter.
He's not the love interest. He's the, at least in the books, the gay character that winds up with Magnus Bane.
Okay, I can't remember who that is.
Magnus Bane is the warlock.
No. Yeah. I remember Magnus, you could remember. It's most of the rest of the cast who go, who are any of you people?
I don't think it's in that movie, but certainly in the later books, they wind up as a couple.
Okay.
Not the love interest, the kind of angsty friend of the love interest.
So not the one, not Harry Potter who got turned into a vampire, not Draco Malfoy. Is he Ron Weasley? Or is he...
you're going by Harry Potter analogies.
Because they mapped really closely.
In that case, I think Draco Malfoy would be your love interest.
Yeah.
Harry Potter's the one that turns into a vampire. So it's neither of those two, it's the other boy.
So it's got to be Ron Weasley.
Mm.
Harry Potter turned into a vampire, of course, first done by My Immortal, many years before Cassandra Clare ever got to it.
Oh dear.
Anyway, Kevin Zegers was also in House MD.
Okay.
But then again, we've got Kenneth Walsh, who played Simon Gates, he's in quite a lot. He was in Crocodile Dundee 2. He was in Time Cop. He was in Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. But just for you.
Yeah.
He's in Psycho Gorman.
Is he really?
He is the narrator and the adjudicator.
Oh, that's awesome.
Of course, he was also in Twin Peaks as Wyndham Earle, the man who killed Ted Raimi in a chess piece.
Yeah, but he was also in Psycho Gorman.
He was also in Psycho Gorman. He was also in Due South, and he was even on Star Trek Discovery. Michael Berryman played Owen Jarvis, who was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Hills of Eyes 1 and 2, managed to make it into Star Trek 4, 5, and The Next Generation, Beastmaster 2, and Double Dragon. Because who remembers there was a film of Double Dragon?
It should be noted that Michael Berryman said that this one is his favourite role he's ever played because he's usually typecast as the baddie because of his appearance.
Poor man. Okay, but then, of course, the biggest star they have, and the guy who doesn't even make it through the cold open, would be Arlie Emery as Reverend Patrick Findlay. Arlie Emery, of course, mostly brought in to be Arlie Emery when you get him in voice cast, so he's in a lot of stuff. But he started out in Apocalypse Now. Uncredited before Full Metal Jacket, which is the basis of every other role he's ever had. He's in A Space Above and Beyond, Toy Stories 1, 2, and 3. See a Sarge.
Oh, is he Sarge? Yeah.
He's in The Simpsons. He's in The Frighteners, of course. All of these being the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket. In Invader Zim, again. Then he was in Seven, where he wasn't doing that.
No, true.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where he also wasn't doing it. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we have to point out, though, is like film 5. It's one called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as opposed to all the other ones that have the similar titles.
There are at least 3 that are called Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
With slightly varying titles because that series is a mess. Seriously, if you haven't looked at it, go look up on Wikipedia And just look at the timelines, because there are 3 concurrent timelines that crisscross each other.
Yeah, I watched them all last Halloween. It gets very confusing after a while.
He was also in Father of the Pride.
Yes, he was.
House MD again, because he's House's dad.
Oh, of course he is, yeah.
And, I don't think you found it yet, SpongeBob SquarePants. Well, I can bet he's Sarge again.
You just think of him as being the drill sergeant.
Kubrick brought him in to advise the guy who was being cast as that character.
The Full Metal Jacket one.
Yeah, he was brought in as an advisor, and he was sort of trying to make sure that he wasn't going to be, utterly brutal and everything. And somewhere along the line, Kubrick said, "Why don't you do it?" And thus the legend was born that has been this mainstay of referencing ever since.
And how you think of drill sergeants as being, especially in the US.
Absolutely, you cannot get away from it, really, can you? But anyway, revelations. Reverend Patrick Findlay in Pennsylvania fakes stigmatic injuries during a sermon. Afterwards, he's approached by a white-haired man, who we will later find out is called Simon Gates, who strangles him, while his hands smoke. Mulder and Scully investigate the case, and Mulder says the minister is the 11th fake stigmatic who has been killed over the past 3 years in a series of international murders. In an elementary school in Ohio, Kevin Kreider starts bleeding from his palms. Mulder and Scully arrive and meet with a social worker who claims Kevin has suffered injuries before. His father's been institutionalized, claiming that Kevin was in danger from evil forces. Mulder and Scully visit Kevin's father, who claims his son is the chosen one, and evil forces will come to kill him as part of a great war between good and evil. Kevin is put into foster care and is abducted by a bald man. His mother recognizes the man immediately as Owen Jarvis, who has done yard work for the family in the past. Owen claims to be Kevin's guardian angel, but as the agents arrive to arrest him, Kevin vanishes from the house. Owen claims he was asked by God to protect Kevin and criticizes Scully for her faith not being as strong as his. Owen flees, jumping out the window, and escapes. Kevin arrives home and is pursued by Simon Gates, who then kill Owen when he arrives to protect Kevin. Scully performs an autopsy and finds that Owen's corpse is not decaying, reminding her of incorruptibles that she learned due to Catholicism. Mulder tells Scully to not let her faith cloud her judgment. During the autopsy, Scully finds handprints on Owen's neck that belong to Simon Gates, a rich and powerful executive. Kevin's mother's car breaks down, and Gates arrives to offer to help fix the car. Kevin manages to bilocate and is able to distract Simon away from his mother and allow them to escape. However, Kevin's mother was injured in the encounter with Simon Gates and runs the car into a ditch and dies as a result. Scully and Mulder find Kevin shortly afterwards, and Scully says she will protect Kevin. They take him to a hotel, where Scully notices an additional wound on Kevin's side, being a 5th sign of stigmata. Scully becomes upset that Mulder will not even consider that a miracle is possible in this context. As they talk, Simon Gates breaks into the bathroom and kidnaps Kevin by prying an opening in the barred window. They attempt to discuss the situation with Kevin's father, but find him insensibly drugged. Scully theorizes that Gates has brought Kevin to a recycling plant he owns in Jerusalem, Ohio. Mulder thinks instead he is headed to the airport, as a man matching Gates' description was reported there. The pair split up, and Scully goes to the recycling plant and finds Gates telling Kevin he must die for a new age to come. Gates attempts to jump into a paper shredding machine with Kevin, but Kevin manages to grab onto the side as Gates falls into the shredder and is killed. Scully is able to pull Kevin to safety. 2 days later, Scully and Kevin say goodbye. Kevin tells Scully he will see her again. Rather than heading home immediately, Scully asks for a short personal while and goes to a church for a confession for the first time in 6 years. She says she has drifted away from the church and is unsettled by the events she has witnessed, and even more unsettled by the fact that Mulder, usually the more open to belief of the two of them, did not believe or experience any of the phenomenon. The priest advises her sometimes we must come full circle to find the truth, which echoes the recycling symbol that led Scully to Simon Gates' recycling centre.
Good work.
This episode is basically insane.
Should I get my "but I like it" out of the way now?
Oh no, I would say I do very much enjoy this episode, but I think the one reaction I really had after this is I want Scully to keep this up for every future episode. Like Mulder will say aliens and ghosts and everything else, and Scully says, but it could be the mysterious hand of the Almighty moving in unseen ways, or the second coming of Christ.
There is a clear distinction in the X-Files between religious faith and Mulder's faith.
Yes. And this one's interesting though, because we didn't get this in Miracle Man, which you'd think would actually be where you'd have had this come up a lot more. It's touched on, they like mention it, but nothing like this scale of stuff happens.
You have the idea of translocation in both of them.
Yeah.
Because the kid teleports in this one and creates like a double of himself. And similarly, you get after, I forget his name, but the healer in Miracle Man dies, he appears before someone in the manner of Christ rising from the dead.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of odd that we've just started to go, no, Scully's going to have a belief episode, we're going to go all in.
I guess you forget because Scully's portrayed as being the scientific skeptic at times, she is also a lapsed Catholic.
Yeah, and I'd have loved it if this was the start of her religious reawakening, where she starts to see signs of God and everything.
Mm.
But we know from Coprophages, she's going right back to type immediately after this. This is a one-off for her. Or is a one-off for now, we should say, because it's probably going to happen one or two more times.
I think it's a more overtly religious episode than Miracle Man, though, because Miracle Man as well, it looks like a religious experience, but nothing to really say it is.
I suppose so, and both of them are equally skeptical in that one. There's nothing like this where Scully just buys into it really early on.
For some reason, faith healers are too far for Scully, but stigmatics, we can get behind that.
Even as a don't note in the episode that the stigmata is wrong, because I know this is the usual thing, because it's like the film Stigmata makes a big thing of she gets the stigmata through her wrists rather than through her palm.
To do the gory part, to get out of the way, Roman crucifixions happened in a number of different ways, but the mistake people often believe is the hand isn't structurally sound if you were nailed through the palm of your hand.
They don't do that.
It's more likely that a nail, if you were nailed, most crucifixions, they were just actually tied to the cross, which indeed people debate whether Jesus was or not either, because there is only one reference to wounds on the hands in the Bible, and it's after he rises. But if you were to be nailed to the cross, the nail would more sensibly go between your radius and ulna through your forearm.
Yeah.
Because that's the structurally sound. And the mistake they think in translation comes because in Greek, the word for hand refers to your arm from your fingertips to your elbow.
Ah.
So you could say he was nailed from the hand, and it could literally mean anywhere down your forearm.
It does mean that that quite a large number of stigmatics over the years just blatantly can't be true, because that's not correct.
Interestingly, the feet is also a contention, because some depictions of crucifixes have like a footrest where people would stand and therefore they'd suffer for longer. But they've also found evidence of bodies from the time that had essentially the legs pressed together and the nail driven through both heel bones instead. So again, it wouldn't have been the front of your foot and it wouldn't have been your ankle. It's the most structurally sound part of the foot.
Just because they got to suspend you for that long. Pretty grisly, but...
Yeah, but there's your grisly historical facts of the day. So, arguably, you could be nailed in the arms or you could be tied, but it's unlikely that, like most classic stigmatics, the wound will go straight through the palm of your hand.
Yeah. And again, the film Stigmata actually does this correctly, bizarrely.
Yeah, it's been many years since I saw it, but I do recall that that's a plot point.
Yeah, because she doesn't believe it possibly true because it's not going through her hands. But anyway, that's Stigmata. We're on Revelations, which... Scully, I'd love you to change your whole mindset at this point, but you're not going to. But it's kind of fun, kind of frustrating to see them reverse like this, given Mulder is just flat out, nope.
I think it's, as you pointed out, there's the scene where the bars on the window are melted, and if you had posited Mulder that it was a lava monster, that would have been fine.
Exactly. And he's saying, oh, it could be an oxyacetylene torch. Are you insane, Mulder? You said this kind of crap to Scully every week of, oh, it could be a lava man swooping from the bars. For the first time, it's like this random executive who went to Jerusalem and has possibly got Jerusalem syndrome did it with his bare hands. That's right out.
It's also a minute. Scully turns her back on that kid for a minute, and Mulder wants to buy that someone's melted the bars with a oxy torch in that time.
Well, it's also Mulder, and I understand again, we're trying to do the reversal here, but they've not been torched and cut away or anything. They've been superheated and pulled apart, which you don't do if you're messing with an oxyacetylene torch. Plus, Kira's going to hear that from inside the bathroom when you're doing this. It's going to take a while. It's remarkable that Kevin wasn't burned being pulled through that relatively small gap in the end.
I think you've got to accept for the climax of this that there's about 9 times that Simon could have killed him instantly.
And
But we have to drag this out for the ending dramatic bit.
And he just doesn't. We can also say that this is also Mulder being a complete jerk to Scully in terms of work. Because we go to see Arlie Emery's death. Oh, it's another stigmata, but he was faking them. Oh yeah, there's been 11 others worldwide, Scully. Did you not brief her about this in the car?
I also like the bit where he licks the fake blood just to evidently make everybody marginally uncomfortable in the vicinity.
Oh no, it's fake. Apparently ketchup, which I don't know how he got away with for any other time, because people would be saying, the Reverend smells a lot of tomatoes, don't you think? I mean, really, what's going on?
I think corn syrup's normally the done thing.
Yeah, I mean, you might equate it to Metal Gear Solid, but that was over a low-res video camera that no one was going to be able to smell its ketchup when they see it.
Mm.
Whereas he's doing this in front of a full congregation, and he's just spraying tomato ketchup everywhere, apparently. I don't know if it was as much of a cliche at the time, but it feels very, very obvious now, at least, for whatever Kevin is. They're very careful not to say he's like Christ reincarnated or something, or he's a new apostle. But for him to be a bit of a jerk as a kid, that feels really typical. I'm thinking kind of like the Shazam film.
Yeah.
Where Billy Bunton is kind of Billy Batson, sorry. Kind of a teenage tearaway, and then gets to the powers and everything, versus the old comics where he was an exemplary, upstanding child. It feels very typical for that to be how we're going to start it.
Kind of accept now that if you're writing a preteen or young teen characters, they have to be a bit selfish and not quite rational.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they're not believably a young teenager.
No, but then again, it also feels the mythic destiny thing feels really cliche by this point Of course, it's the terrible kid is the one with the mythic destiny.
It's heavily inferred he is the second coming as well, because at least Simon believes that if he kills the kid, hell will reign on Earth.
Yeah, or whatever's going on. And we're going to have to keep out notice, though Kevin is down for only one episode of The X-Files, so when he says, Scully, you'll see me again, I'm not sure that's correct, Kevin.
You don't know when it'll be? It could be in 20 years' time after the series is finished.
When she's head of the FBI.
When she's head of the FBI, yeah. So, yeah, the episode hinges on the idea that there are 12 stigmatics in the world at any time, which is not a myth I've actually been able to verify anywhere, but, corresponding to the number of apostles.
Yeah, and what's weird is that they apparently are all fake, except for Kevin.
Or we just haven't seen the real ones, we don't really know how on the level Simon is, other than the fact he does have some supernatural powers, if he really is an agent of the devil.
Yeah, I suppose that's the thing, though. The episode is made very ambiguous, other than he can, superheat metal bars and pull them apart, and whatever he's doing to kill Owen and Aldi Emery at the start.
I believe that was intentional. The episode at the time was actually quite well received, but they were aiming to make it an episode about faith and not something that would be perceived as an attack on Catholicism, because, that could have gone south very quickly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can certainly see them getting that in. I'm sorry, just noticed my note, there's some weird bits, like when the thermometer breaks, I'm not entirely sure what that was about.
Maybe the Son of God is...
really hot. Take that however you want to. To skip ahead a bit, though, the one thing I think the really good thing I think about the episode is Scully's confessional at the end. It's not so much the confessional bit, it's how the priest tries to break down how her experience is different to Mulder's. In that she's experienced these religious phenomena and he has just brushed past them because he didn't see them as anything notable. And he's saying it's a message for you from God or something. That's paraphrase what he's saying. The thing So I like that as the whole, this is very Scully-centric, this is all about her faith and everything. But I'd also like her to interpret this the other way round. So when Mulder's doing something weird or sees something weird, do you not think that might be the same thing, but not in your direction? So the message has been directing you to Scully, so you're not getting what Mulder gets out of it. It feels like it could lead to a better understanding between the two of them. Or at least Scully could understand Mulder more. Mulder needs to work on understanding Scully because he just doesn't.
I get this. The difference is the nature of Scully's faith is that what Mulder's lunacy often gives away in the episodes is not the word of the divine.
No.
So this is a message from one specific source coming from Scully, not the combined method of aliens, Bigfoot, and the Chupacabra coming from Mulder.
But it's one of these things. Modern religion, though, you try to rationalize that as that's a different way of experiencing God. Mulder's just getting it through this weird Instagram filter.
It's this is the way the Lord is speaking to Mulder.
Yeah, so he's going to be in the right place at the right time. He's just being pushed there by a weird thing, because that could absolutely become part of Scully's understanding of how the X-Files works.
I like that as an idea of the only way the Almighty can speak to Mulder as well, is, all right, he's going to dismiss this automatically if he thinks it's coming from a higher power. Let's make him think it's the aliens.
Exactly. I mean, it is one of the things you have to try and wrestle with the X-Files ultimately, at least until we get to the end of season 9, because after that we get to a very strange point, and we'll come to that when we get to it. But of almost everything's real, so we definitely have this divine mandate in Revelations. We also definitely have shape-shifting aliens. We also definitely have tombs. We definitely have the Fluke Man. Definitely have the wormy things from ice, and the silicon-based life form from fire.
Ghosts and psychics.
Yeah, so we've got Clyde Bruckman and we've got Shadows, amongst other ones. And the X-Files, I mean, is basically like the 14 times saying, yeah, everything's true, whereas the 14 times, if you actually read the 14 times, is as insane as it sounds, they're always very careful to say, we can only go to this conclusion because we don't have anything definitive. 14 times is actually more restraint than you'd ever think.
It's more scientific than you'd think, the 14, because they do provide counter-explanations and things.
Exactly. It's not, the 14 times is actually bizarrely should actually be better regarded than some of the other conspiracy magazines I've read in my time, which is just, where is this coming from? How have you come to this conclusion? This is based on nothing. I think this must be the first time Scully's ever been kind of picked on for her religion. Like Owen sort of saying, you're not as good a Christian or Catholic as I am.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong, but it's kind of out of the blue, really. It's like, oh, Scully's wearing a crucifix. Yeah, that's been like a character detail for a while. It's just never really come up. I mean, the most significant time that crucifix came up, really, was Dwayne Barry in Ascension. And One Breath, obviously, for returning it to her. It's kind of odd on reflection that it's not the crucifix that Toombs stole. She was wearing a different necklace that time, wasn't she?
Yeah, it wasn't. I remembered it being the crucifix, but it wasn't. It was a different pendant that I don't think we've ever seen again.
No, and I think it points to Series 1 was very much in flux of a lot of things weren't settled yet. And Scully's religion, because otherwise, again, I think Miracle Man would have made more of it if they'd sort of decided they were really going to go for that. If they'd had Revelations as a later idea they were going to explore, Miracle Man would have tried to set up a bit more stuff rather than Revelations being, Scully is going to believe that Owen is a saint. Can't really argue with her conclusions, but that's a weird one to lay on us. Scully, who does the autopsies and is generally very serious about these things.
It's interesting thinking of Scully as a lapsed Catholic as well, and perhaps we could argue that her experience on the X-Files has made her return to religion. Because she's been brought up as a Catholic, kind of put that aside and gone through medical school and become a pathologist. And now, through her experience with Mulder, she's starting to return to Catholicism. I have now experienced weird things I cannot explain. This now seems like an open possibility.
It does. I think the contrary to that, again, is and again, I feel it's not really fair to ding the X-Files for this, because this is more, the 90s was this transitional point from always single episodes to like series arcs, which we get more these days.
Well, you have the idea of Dexter, where it all follows the same little plot.
And most other things, because I think, a good example, Game of Thrones or something, just something that basically everything's geared towards pushing you towards whatever the end point is. And the X-Files is definitely one where they're kind of dabbling with it. I think Star Trek Deep Space Nine is the other good example of something that shifted into it as it went on. Deep Space Nine was one-off episodes, and as Babylon 5 came up in popularity, they started trying to mimic it.
Yeah.
Revelations in itself is great. It feels odd again coming after 731. Because 731 was, all your magical thinking, Mulder, all your magical thinking about aliens has a mundane human explanation. So you think if she was sort of into this whole belief mindset, 731 would have pushed them more into the whole things outside of my understanding. Whereas Revelations is very much a case of, yeah, all the weird stuff is actually true. Mulder's just wrong about this one. We'd have to say, though, that Simon Gates is one of the least subtle assassins in the world, because he's managed to burn his fingerprints into this guy's neck. Not Arlie Emery's neck, just Owen's.
Yes, again, he kills Owen in a lot more rushed manner than he does Arlie Emery's character. But at the same time, we never find out what he is.
No, it's really odd, because he's gone to Jerusalem and come back, and now he appears to be mad.
The thing it cites is something called Jerusalem syndrome, where essentially the atmosphere and just being in such a highly concentrated religious place like that makes you believe that you're part of the story, essentially. So our argument for him could be that he's gone to Jerusalem after, I believe it was like a hit and run accident that he caused or something like that.
He killed a young boy or something.
Yeah, went to Jerusalem, found himself in the bad way and believes that now he's an agent of Beelzebub, and comes back to murder stigmatics because he believes that this will hasten the apocalypse.
Yeah. And I've got to wonder in real life, has that ever happened? Because I think most people, Jerusalem syndrome is generally you believe in God and you onto the whole God side. You
start to believe that you're some kind of disciple instead.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Satan recruitment doesn't usually happen in Jerusalem.
No, it's a strange story, but at the same time, he has powers. Yeah. He has his burning hands power. So if it's not Jerusalem syndrome, something has happened to this man and maybe he's legit.
Could be. Again, I think the problem here as well, though, that it's Mulder so adamant believing that Simon Gates is mundane that he can't speculate on a different theory that's happened to him. Because, it feels more frustrating than Beyond the Sea. Because in Beyond the Sea, Mulder had a track record with Luther Lee Boggs and doesn't believe him because of his past.
Because he's lied in the past.
Yeah. Whereas Simon Gates, he's just met for the first time. He didn't even meet Simon Gates. I don't think Mulder ever meets this guy.
No.
But he's very ready to just toss all the supernatural explanations out because he doesn't want to. And you could say, okay, so maybe he was abducted by aliens on the way to Jerusalem and he's got some weird powers like that, or bitten by, I don't know, a fire ant in Jerusalem or something.
It's also Mulder, as our psychologist, as we've said many times before. A lot of the potential information we have about Simon comes from Kevin's dad, who's institutionalized.
Yeah.
So Mulder dismisses it off the bat.
I know.
Because the things that this guy says are religious rambling of, there are forces of darkness, it will come in the form of a powerful and respectful man, which it does.
Yep.
There's going to be a great war between good and evil. We've got to go full circle to find the truth, the awful, awful clue that leads us to the ending in the recycling plant, because of the round logo.
Yep.
And apparently, in a cutscene as well, the guy then began speaking in tongues, which included Klaatu Barada Nikto.
Might be going a little bit far at that point.
But in that scene, apparently, even though he was speaking in tongues, Scully could understand him perfectly, which also fed into Scully's divine destiny. But Mulder is so quick to dismiss this guy, yet if it was Clyde Bruckman, say, or the girl from Uberlet saying these random cryptic things, that would have been fine.
Exactly. Mulder has dabbled with magic and magical tendencies before. This, just because it's got a religious frame on it, he wants nothing to do with it.
Mm.
I can kind of get to a point. I mean, you could say this is a character flaw of Mulder. Is he's not touching it because he doesn't want the implications of it. Because if he can accept this now, what does that imply about everything else? What does it imply about Scully? And then, to be fair though, that should then lead him into the bigger mess of, wait, how is the Almighty allowing the weird stuff to happen because of the aliens? Shouldn't he be looking out for us, or is God in truth an alien?
Do I have to explain the best of all possible worlds again to you?
You don't, but you need to explain it to Mulder.
True.
Because Mulder doesn't get that.
For the record, that's Leibniz speaking, as it was a debate between Leibniz and Voltaire, two philosophical thinkers, about if there is a God, why do bad things happen in the world? Our place to understand what the limitations of a godly figure are.
That's true.
The cockroach, and coming up in our next episode, we're literally the cockroach. So one of the biggest things I like about this episode is Michael Berryman's character. If you've seen any horror movie ever, you've probably seen Michael Berryman before. He is a very distinct looking actor because he suffers from a condition called hypohydrotic ectodermal dysplasia. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. but it's a condition that affects keratin growth, which gives him this distinct look with no hair or fingernails, and he's very, very tall. But this is a rare occurrence, as I mentioned at the start, where he ultimately plays the good guy, and arguably he might actually be a saint or a guardian angel.
Scully certainly implies he is a saint, or should be considered a saint, because of how he's decomposing.
There's this thing in certain stories of saints where they don't really decompose and instead they smell fresh and floral, which is what happens to him in the morgue. But at the same time, there's a neat scene when he's first introduced, and you as the audience, because we're hardwired if someone looks different or maybe a bit creepy, we think they're the villain. But there's this kind of whole Fall of the House of Usher scene where Kevin's describing a monster stalking kids, and then he bursts into the room looking vaguely like this description of the monster. And from that moment, you think that the entire episode is going to take a very different turn to what it does.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only problem, the weird problem I would have with that, as much as it works very well, is you saw Simon Gates kill Arlie Emery at the start. I suppose you could conclude that this is Guy's minion.
Or you go the other way, and Arlie Emery is somehow bad, and Simon Gates is the agent of God. You often have these kind of warrior angels that we can't really understand, but they've got their own agenda. I mean, like Supernatural, for example. With the angel cast in that being not nice and flowery and harp playing.
I don't know. I mostly know about Castiel thanks to Tumblr, so that gives me a very skewed interpretation of the character, I must say.
I see. But from this, you've got this demonic image of, there's things like his fingers are claws because they've been burnt in the fires of hell and stuff like that. And then Owen walking into the room, you immediately think this is the monster from the kid's story.
Oh, yeah. Given form. But of course, he's actually a nice guy who's carved Noah's Ark.
And is very kind of peaceful and gentle and doesn't hurt Owen, is concerned about keeping him safe.
Yeah.
And evidently has read the script and knows what's coming for him to some degree.
And he's about to shotgun Mulder before he's sort of held up.
It's all in the protection of the child, which unfortunately Mulder and Scully don't realise, and ultimately Owen does fall protecting the child. You've also not really mentioned at all Kevin's mother as a character in this episode.
Oh, I suppose that's fair. She's... Oh, well, it's odd how they played up the family dynamic, whereas the stigmata isn't new, but they've kind of blamed it on the dad, and because the dad got himself institutionalized.
The dad was a crazy religious fanatic who held his son hostage.
Yeah. Or was trying to protect his son, I think it was how he phrased it, but yeah.
But the way it's viewed is he took the child hostage, claiming that outside forces were trying to hurt him. So child support services rightly thought he must be the one harming this child. Look at this aggressive, unstable personality.
I suppose that's the thing this episode doesn't do that you would expect to see in some other episodes, is for this to be an older X-File. Like, this is something that came across Mulder's desk when the dad was institutionalized, and he dismissed it there. And you can even just do an offhand land. It's like, yeah, this case came to me 3 years ago. I didn't think there was anything to it. I didn't expect it to come back like this.
But you actually have very little focus on Mom in this episode. She surprisingly appears less than you'd think because of Owen's inclusion and Scully kind of taking guardianship of Kevin after a while.
Well, it's also, if the death is actually just implied in the episode, it's not until that summary was a case of, oh yeah, she actually does die at that point.
Yeah, I wasn't 100%, but yeah, it seems very small, but again, in a way that's more realistic, is she has a struggle with Simon, she falls and hits her head, which she manages to stay conscious for a little while to help get Kevin to safety, but then crashes a car and apparently dies. But I suppose it's that we've been hardened in watching TV to think that a head wound isn't anywhere near as serious as it actually is, and that little knock to head probably would be fatal.
I do feel Mulder's exacerbation a bit though when Scully says, oh, let's take care of the boy, and Mulder's go, what, really? Do we have to?
There are entire government agencies for this.
Yeah, there are other people who do this, Scully. We're not meant to be doing anything to do it.
And I think in a way Mulder's entirely right, because they have Kevin for all of 5 minutes and he gets kidnapped again.
To be fair, the chances of being pulled out through a bathroom window like that were nil.
Which leads to our ridiculous come full circle to find the truth and our showdown at the recycling plant.
Who knew recycling was evil? I mean, I'm just going to throw all my paper in the regular trash now, because clearly it's can't. Was no one think? Surely someone must have said, "There's got to be a better way of getting this in than it being the recycling logo," because that's not a good way
I think
to do
it's
it.
at the same time, though, if he was the owner of the local nuclear power plant, you'd hit on, yep, that's our baddie so fast. The owner of the local recycling plant seems a bit more benign.
True, but I think you could also make the argument, though, we're not allowed any chance of coming up to speed with what's going on in this episode, because we don't know Simon Gates' name for 3/4 of the episode.
He's not named till very late on.
He's not named until very late on. And while we get the whole sort of he's the bad guy aiming for Kevin, I think basically we're never given information, so there's no way for us to know or guess in advance that he does run a recycling plant, because that's kind of a revelation that comes as they need it to come in the script.
I think the bizarre clue that leads them to link Gates into this is the fact that he's rented a car under the name of something like Faram, which Mulder says, oh yes, that's one of the devil's disciples. It's like, is it Mulder?
And why do you know this, Mulder, when you've just been poo-pooing everything else?
Oh, also, that's demons. Demons are allowed.
Okay. Then that has reminded me then, it's really odd, Mulder's attitude, given D. Hander. Because he recognises that, I'm going to have to do the shorthand, Bulldog Briscoe is quoting scripture at him, and he just sort of retorts immediately. And it's a case of, but you don't care about this, Mulder, why do you know this?
And at the same time, we never outwardly say what Ms. Paddock is, but it's kind of obvious to the audience, and Mulder never really refutes the fact that she is a demon.
Yeah. And I suppose that's another thing that feels frustrating, is they could have built on D. Hander for this, because that's clearly, while that was very much going into a more Satanism kind of thing, it's not divorced enough that you couldn't have linked Miss Paddock into this somehow.
It's one of those things where it feels odd if Mulder didn't put up that much of a fight against Satanism. You can't really have Satan without God.
Yeah, it's very, what are you doing, Mulder? This is, as much as I did enjoy the episode, I feel the flaw of the episode was the writing process was, let's reverse Mulder and Scully's positions for a change and do it more fully than we've ever done before, without actually getting into, yeah, you can do this. You're going to have to be careful how you do it, because we've got other episodes that will directly contradict what we're trying to do here.
I think that's the bigger problem with it, because Revelations is not a bad episode.
It's not. Again,
it's surprising. So it's a lot of fun and I enjoy it. But it's the fact that I feel that now we're halfway through season 3, we should have been building on this more.
Yeah, I think it's much like my problems with Firewalker, it's the placement in the season does it no favours. If you'd again...
If you'd swapped this with Miracle Men, say, and done it in season 1.
That would have been better. And then you'd have to sort of build a Miracle Man up a different way if you still want to do it. But again, I do wonder how fair this is, because, again, 90s was more episode of the week, and you might get some build-up and some character growth over time, but you didn't get arc storylines in the way that the X-Files wants to do, but also doesn't want to do. Because, like, the Conspiracy, it's happy to build them all off each other. The Monster of the Week, though, it's trying to silo them, and it doesn't seem to understand that you can't do it both.
Fair, that was Chris Carter's idea for the mythology episode. The Monster of the Week episodes. Is the mythology episodes would follow a structure, but the Monster of the Week ones were designed so people could just dip in and watch them.
That's true. But at the same time, for long-term viewers, they really should build off each other, though, shouldn't it?
You want at least there to be maybe little arcs. I guess like what we had with Squeeze and Tombs.
That kind of thing.
Is 2 episodes that are connected that tell a complete story.
I mean, what I'm also thinking of more like is Soft Light. The fact that we've got a very, very quick reference to Squeeze when Scully checks the air duct. It's having that past experience and then applying it to a future case is what I want more of, rather than treating each one almost as if it's the first case.
Your problem arises more, I think, than in the comedy episodes. Like, in a world where you have things like Clyde Bruckman and what we're about to see in War of the Coprophages, is then applying them to the serious episodes.
I know, I mean, when you get down to it, the X-Files structurally is just a complete mess from start to finish. It has no consistency as much as it wants to be about a grand world conspiracy about the end of days. You've got to have all this other side stuff that comes in and it's got nothing to do with it.
But on the other hand, if you take the episodes in the way they're meant to be taken as one-shots, it's fun.
It is fun. I'm not going to say it's not fun.
If you unconnect them and kind of don't try and recall back to every other time we should have mentioned the pyromaniac, which I feel we could have got to in this episode.
Absolutely.
If Mulder can buy Cecil Lively but can't buy someone with hot hands.
That's a really good point. I mean, he could have thought it was like Cecil Lively again.
I do keep coming back to Cecil. Oh gosh, I wish we could bring him back. But
Unfortunately, no DPO versus Cecil Lively.
one day. Can bring Simon in, apart from the fact that Simon gets
It's
such a
minced.
grisly death at the set. And
Oh my
as you
God.
pointed, you see an arm flying
Oh.
past at one point. It's for the X-Files in particular, nasty end. That, again, maybe I'm going to give a criticism for this episode, and I don't want to because I like this episode. But it's at the same time, we've got to a point where we couldn't figure out how to end the episode again.
Oh no, we did
So
not.
Simon could just hurl the kid into the recycling machine, but decides to hurl himself into it as well.
And as you said, has had 15 different points he can literally kill this child, and has failed at every one of them.
It's the Tuck and Dale, that kid just threw himself into the wood chipper sort of moment to it. But yeah, it's just for the drama of our Satanist stroke demonic disciple hurling himself into a machine with big rotating blades.
And as you said again, it's, while you understand the whole, you've got to have clues towards the demonic possession or the Satan worship and everything, it's like, don't rent cars under demon names. Come on. Like, even Dracula knew to sign in as Dr. Alucard. Which is, is just rubbish. But anyway, at least he tried.
Not the essential, Lord Ashmedai, your vehicle is ready.
Yeah, or I don't know. B. Zelbub. It's what I was going to say. Forces of darkness. You can be more subtle. I understand that Mulder is mad, but you don't have to be this obvious.
But yeah, and so that leads us to our end of the episode. We've noted that IMDb has told us that Kevin is not going to make a comeback, unless he's recast, of course, I suppose. But Kevin has got better. His stigmata is gone again, at least for now. But there's an indication that Scully remains as the agent of God and might be needed to help the divine plan again in the future.
Quite an accomplishment for Dana Scully at this point.
He's doing better than Mulder.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically not been murdered because it'll cause problems at the moment. It's the best you've got going for Mulder, I think. Well, no mythic destiny for him.
But yeah, so I guess unless you've got anything else, that's probably Revelations.
So let's talk about cockroaches.
We'll just say in final Revelations is I think it's been one of the better Monster of the Week episodes this season so far.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, I think it's very fun. My major criticism is it's in the wrong position, just in terms of the season. And also, I would want it to completely change how Scully approaches the X-Files in general, and it won't.
No, true.
But again, it would be just entertaining to have. I mean, I equate this to House, really. Basically, you've got, the basic structure of House, where basically the patient has the accident, everyone has a theory. One of them is it could be lupus.
Yeah.
So I want this to be Scully every week.
This is Scully's lupus.
Yeah, it could be God. And I don't, and there's no actual appreciable reason why it can't be, because the priest has just said, maybe this is how you experience in the world, so Scully could then say, oh, well, okay, that's kind of a divine explanation. I mean, admittedly, I think this could actually be how the series Strange operates. It's been too long.
It pretty much is how Strange operates.
So what? Basically, Strange took this bizarre idea about Scully and ran with it, and if we get to Strange, that's going to be exhausting again.
If I can get hold of Strange, one day I will do a Strange retrospective, because
you can do Strange retrospective again.
That was our what they hoped would be our English X-Files for a time, and it ran about 6 episodes.
Yeah, and then the conclusion is on a website somewhere because they ran out of money to do they weren't allowed to do another episode, and the conclusion's just a text summary.
But yeah, you ain't seen nothing yet till I will find it one way or another, and I will bring to you Strange at some point.
Let's talk about cockroaches.
Cockroaches!
So, War of the Coprophages. Directed by Kim Manners, written by Darin Morgan, and first broadcast on the 5th of January 1995. Significant guest stars. Bobby Phillips plays Dr. Bambi Berenbaum, who doesn't have great credits to her name, but I think if I say these, and you'll know why she was hired, because this is very much like how they hired Boobfoot.
Ah.
So she was in Showgirls.
Yep.
And she was in Baywatch twice. So make of that what you will.
Oh dear.
Slightly better though. We've got Ray Burke, who plays Dr. Jeff Ekeler, who was in. He's been in quite a lot. Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension.
How do you find these?
They're just in them. He was in Naked Gun and
Okay.
Naked Gun 33 and a third. He was one of the few returning characters in that series. He was in Star Trek Insurrection and Next Generation. He's in Cheers. He's been on Seinfeld, Third Rock from the Sun, Carol in the City, somehow also in Baywatch, Columbo, Babylon 5, and it's been a while, Frasier.
Yay!
There are, of course, some other guest stars, but none of them get Wikipedia entries, so.
Our episode opens this time in the town of Miller's Grove, which is in Massachusetts. We open on an exterminator inspecting the basement of Dr. Jeff Eckerl. He's been hired to eradicate a cockroach infestation there. The exterminator waxes lyrical about how impressive cockroaches are as a species, and sprays a roach, knocking it to the ground and attempting to crush it to death. However, in doing so, he suddenly begins to succumb to what appears to be anaphylaxis. He clutches at his chest and collapses, and we see the roach that he was trying to kill crawling away absolutely unharmed. Eckerl returns because he's thought of something else to tell the exterminator and finds his body absolutely swarming with cockroaches. Coincidentally, Mulder is nearby at the time. He's investigating a reported UFO sighting in the area. He's on the phone with Scully when he is approached by the local sheriff, Sheriff Frass. He tells Mulder about the series of roach attacks that have taken place in the town, and Mulder, of course, is instantly interested in this and decides to join the investigation. As Mulder goes to investigate the death of the exterminator, we also see that elsewhere in town there are 3 teenagers who have met to drink beer and huff on fumes generated from heated manure, because things were very different in the 90s. One of them starts to see or possibly hallucinate a cockroach crawling into an open wound on his wrist. He begins in a panic to try and get rid of the insect, which results in him frantically and fatally slicing his skin with a razor. While Mulder investigates these 2 deaths, he talks to Scully over the phone at each scene. Scully explains to him that the first murder is probably a case of anaphylactic shock, which is something that's apparently common with exterminators because they're coming into contact with cockroaches a lot. The second one, she explains to him about Ekman syndrome or delusional parasitosis, which is something that's caused by drug misuse where people hallucinate that insects are crawling beneath their skin. While talking to Scully on the phone, Mulder does find a cockroach on the underside of a bit of furniture. He tries to capture it, but it crumbles in his hand. Sharp pieces left over from it cutting its fingers, leaving to Mulder to believe that its exoskeleton was made out of metal. Frass and the other people involved in this case are quite obviously getting a bit nervous about this, paranoia about what these cockroaches are sinking in. Frass tells Mulder that the government is working from the town under the guise of the USDA. He believes that they're breeding killer cockroaches, in the style of killer bees, at a nearby facility. Almost immediately afterwards, the medical examiner who was helping out at both crime scenes is found dead in a bathroom stall. The person who finds him reports that cockroaches were covering his body at the time he was discovered, but they disappear almost immediately. Scully over the phone helps them analyse the body, and they come to the conclusion that he actually died of a cerebral aneurysm, which was caused by overstraining while he was on the toilet. Mulder and Frass also find a seemingly dead cockroach in the sink in the bathroom. Mulder tries to capture it, but again fails to do so and it escapes down the drain. Mulder decides to go and investigate the facility that Frass told him about. While he's on the way there, he and Scully discuss over the phone the strange behaviour of the cockroaches. Scully hypothesises that perhaps they're an invasive species from another country. Mulder enters the facility, admittedly illegally, and discovers it just resembles a typical house, but then he realises that the wallpaper is rippling. As he pokes at it, he finds that the house is absolutely swarming with cockroaches and is confronted by the entomologist researcher from the Department of Agriculture who is studying them there, who is a very, very beautiful woman who Mulder takes an immediate liking to. Her name is Dr. Bambi Berenbaum. Dr. Berenbaum is investigating cockroaches to develop effective methods of pest control. She also has a great interest in insects in general, seeming quite into them, even by my standards. She has also started a study because she believes that UFOs are actually insect swarms flying through electrically charged airspace which causes them to glow. Our next cockroach-related death occurs in Mulder's hotel room. The individual is found in bed covered in roaches that quickly flee once again, but Mulder is starting to believe that it is just mass hysteria at work here, and thinks that the individual probably just died of a heart attack because he was so scared when he saw the cockroaches in his room. Mulder manages to catch a cockroach this time at the hotel room, while Scully finally decides that she's going to head over to help out. Mulder takes his cockroach to Berenbaum, who views it under the microscope and believes it might actually be a machine. Coincidentally, there is another scientist, Dr. Ivanov, working nearby, who is an expert in building insect-like robots. Mulder visits Ivanov, and the two of them discuss the possibility that extraterrestrial intelligence could actually just be sending robotic probes to study other planets. In Ivanov's words, it would be foolish to believe that extraterrestrials would visit as physical entities and not just machines. Mulder gives the specimen he previously showed to Berenbaum to Ivanov to look at. Ivanov is rendered speechless, informing Mulder that technology-wise he's not seen anything as superior as this creature. It boggles his comprehension. Meanwhile, we see Scully arrive at the town and stop at a convenience store. She finds that there is absolute full-blown panic gripping the residents. She attempts to calm people down, however, the store quickly becomes a riot as people fight over the last remaining cans of Dibug Dye pest spray. Mulder finds another cockroach as he leaves Ivanov's lab and tries to take it to Berenbaum, however she concludes that this one is just a normal cockroach. Meanwhile, Scully has found out that Eckel, our guy from the start, who has been present in most of the crime scenes over the course of this episode, was researching drug-derived methane as an alternate fuel source. He'd been importing animal dung from other countries, and Scully believes that he might be the one who introduced strange roaches to the area. Upon learning this from Scully, Mulder speculates that the roaches are actually extraterrestrial robotic probes that are capable of consuming dung, an abundant resource on our planet, to generate methane as a source of renewable fuel. Mulder and Berenbaum go see Eckel at his facility. He tells her to remain in the car while he goes in to find Eckel absolutely hysterical and paranoid, having been unable to escape the cockroaches which he feels are following him everywhere. Eckel pulls a gun on Mulder and, when his phone rings, begins to believe that Mulder is somehow a cockroach himself. Scully arrives and finally meets Berenbaum for the first time and goes into the facility looking for Mulder. As she does so, Eckel begins to fire at Mulder and his shot ruptures and ignites the pipes of methane gas. Mulder manages to grab Scully and flee the scene as it explodes with Eckel still inside. The following morning, as Mulder and Scully sit outside the plant covered in dung, Dr. Ivanov arrives and meets Dr. Berenbaum. The two leave with one another, discussing their shared interest in insects and robotics, much to Mulder's chagrin. The following night, Mulder writes up his report on the case, wondering how humanity would react if robots visited the Earth. Mulder then finds an enormous cockroach sitting by his food and crushes it to death with an X-file.
Thank you. It's a funny episode.
And it's about bugs.
And it's about bugs. I kind of like the misleading start with like a guy in a white shirt, a black tie, expositing about insects, and then puts the light on, and it turns out that's just his uniform. He dresses like this is a bug exterminator for some reason.
And he really loves his job.
But then he knows all this stuff about cockroaches, but then can't answer one question. It's like, have you just memorized this Wikipedia summary or something? And the bugs kill him very quickly, or might not do because it's all carefully ambiguous. This one.
The inspiration of this episode was the Orson Welles' War of the Worlds, which is why it's an episode about mass hysteria.
Completely see that. It feels like it's also more so than Clyde Bruckman or Darin Morgan, like really sort of just jabbing Mulder in the ribs as often as possible. Yeah, UFOs, they could be bug swarms because they react to magnetic fields. And you really think alien life forms are going to come to our planet? No, they're send robots.
Or they could just be swarms of bugs.
Yeah. So yeah, Mulder's entire belief system just called into question over and over again.
I like it as a counterpoint to Clyde Bruckman, because it's the character of Clyde Bruckman is the idea of here's a character that knows everything and his life's miserable. But now we've got the flip side of people being really quick to believe things that have no proof behind them.
Yeah. And Scully's still got her dog. It's been a long time since we've seen that dog.
Clyde Bruckman, I think.
Yeah, because I think we noted at the time is that no one else actually does anything with the fact that Scully has a dog.
Just Darin Morgan.
Just Darin Morgan. I think, oddly enough, where it starts to go wrong is when Scully actually goes to Miller's Grove, because it's far funnier for the phone conversations back and forth. And Mulder saying, "Oh, Scully, you better go up here. I've found X," and her going, "Oh, check this." Oh, okay, yeah, it was that.
I really like this one has a middle grade novel as well. The novel's called Die Bug Die, and it's another Les Martin one. But those sequences in the novel is Mulder kind of relates what Scully's saying over the phone to the people standing around him, and there's always like a doctor or a scientist standing nearby who just nods in agreement as he does so, and I like the framing of it. It's like, no, wait, the pathologist is nodding. Yeah, that's okay.
I mean, as much as I appreciate this, and I understand exactly why they're doing it, you've got to question why this isn't happening every other time when Mulder and Scully are there. Why does Mulder ever get his bizarre theories in?
Yeah.
If they're always this easy. Because they're all presented as mysterious cockroach-related deaths, and they're always given a completely mundane, feasible explanation. Except for the metallic cockroach.
I like the bit at the end as well, where for all the rational explanations Scully gets him, he still gets to robotic cockroach alien probe by the end of the episode.
And there's just enough ambiguity that he found something odd in that metal cockroach. There's definitely something odd happening in amongst the rest of them. The cockroaches haven't killed anyone else.
No. The metal cockroach only shows up once, I think, in the entire episode, and potentially twice in the novel.
Well, it's only...
Because any other time, presumably it'd be indistinguishable from a real cockroach.
Yeah, he finds the exoskeleton first time, and then he finds the legs in the roach metal.
Oh, that's true. In the book as well, the first guy, when he stamps down on the cockroach, he feels a sharp pain in his foot.
Oh, yeah,
which
doesn't crush it.
And it doesn't crush, so I presume that's also the probe, if the probe even exists, because we're in a plot about mass hysteria.
Yeah. It's a good, fun episode, though, and it's just the back and forth between Mulder and Scully is really much the high point.
Mm.
And just little moments like Mulder is trying to seduce Bambi, and his phone rings, like, not now. Just hangs up immediately. On the flip side, it's one of those whole Mulder's putting in an awful lot of effort, and she doesn't seem into him at all.
It's Mulder trying his best, even though he says himself later in the episode he hates bugs, is trying to show that he's interested in bugs because he just essentially wants to sleep with Dr. Berenbaum.
Yeah. And the bug fear is one of those... Surely this should have come up at least once before.
It's much like his fire fear, I think.
Yeah, that one. No one remembers the fire fear. I think it's very interesting, and obviously it's meant to be a throwaway joke, and no one wants to do anything with it. Of him equating a praying mantis's head to a grey alien's head, and you kind of say, yeah, well, just not think that might be a connective tissue with your entire mindset and belief system.
You kind of see it at the end of the episode as well, as when he sees that last cockroach, it does have a very alien face.
Yeah.
So we've got that idea too. That idea continued, I should say.
So, bugs kidnapped Samantha is what I'm concluding.
Absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful bugs kidnapping everyone. I want to note as well that a lot of those cockroaches in this episode are real. There were over 300 cockroaches on set that were all expertly managed, and Kim Manners even admitted that they were a dream to work with. There's a fun anecdote about him trying to direct them by shouting into a bucket full of cockroaches on set. But over the course of the episode, only one cockroach passed away, and that was due to old age. So 299 cockroaches made it out.
Excellent.
And I like bugs, so I was happy with that. I would like to question how that large South American species of cockroach in the end sequence made it into Mulder's apartment, but beyond that I have no problem with cockroach use here.
It's very lost. Sculder shippers, you've got an unexpected gift in this episode, I feel. As much as Mulder is really into Bambi, Scully's jealous.
Quite obviously so.
She's jealous. And very dismissive entomologist. She does not recognise this as a respectable science for some reason.
No, I'm unhappy about that.
It's not clear why she's so down on entomology.
Scully's pure dismissiveness of entomology as being bug science.
I mean, even Bambi's name is explained as a parent of naturalist. It's still a case of, really? Bambi Berenbaum?
The actual character name comes from May Berenbaum, who is a famous entomologist as well. Bambi's wonderful, though. I think her insect-related seduction technique works on me. I'm totally sold.
Well, Mulder tried to make out it worked on him, but he's just not very convincing with it.
Also, Mulder bringing her that sample that was hung like a club-tailed dragonfly, which I think may become my favourite phrase going forward.
She's going to go off and have beautiful babies with Dr. Ivanov. Beautiful robot insect babies.
Robot insect babies.
Both big fans of Planet of the Apes.
There was the cute reference, though, where Scully and Mulder quote Dr. Zayas at the start of the episode, too. And then you bookend it with Bambi Berenbaum quoting it to Dr. Ivanov.
Well, two of them stroll off into the mists, much to Mulder's disappointment. The mass hysteria angle is an interesting one. Although I suppose for the audience, you're always left with some ambiguity because you always see the roaches. You always see the roaches that the characters don't. I think it's that guy on the bed who just had the heart attack is the only time that I think you get a third person who sees the cockroaches before they vanish. Because things like the doctor who dies on the toilet, you see the cockroaches massing behind him.
I think our counter-argument is the fact is we don't know what species these cockroaches are, and Scully tells the story about the invasive species that are attracted to light. So all you have to go on the basis of is this is some weird behaviour. Admittedly, as a fan of bugs, I can't think of any combination of behaviours that would mean that you would swarm a person for 15 seconds and then bugger off again.
Yeah,
But I presume the argument we're getting to is there are species that are attracted to people in some way, whereas a cockroach would normally avoid people.
And wash themselves vigorously, as Bambi says at one.
I can buy that. My beetles don't like being touched either.
We do have, and admittedly I missed them off the guest star list, but they weren't considered important enough, but we'll pick them up again later, of two recurring characters who will show up again later, and the third person who never does. This would be Stoner and Chick.
Or, as the novelization calls them, Albert and Allison.
Not as catchy, is it?
I believe Stoner's played by, I can never remember if it's Tucker or Dale.
He's Dale.
Dale from Tucker and Dale.
And Escape Room.
Yes, he's the guy with the breathing problems in Escape Room.
But these two will go on for 2 more appearances, and they'll always have a friend with them, and the friend won't make it out, and nor does this friend either. And what's really odd, though, is the fact that Stoner and Chick stay friends, because this episode clearly makes out that Stoner is friends with guy who dies, and that Chick, they're trying to seduce her.
In the book, and the book Die Bug Die is hilarious because there are so many innuendos and things that evidently wouldn't pass muster for a novel aimed at the under 12s.
It's a really odd choice in that sense, isn't it? Why did you pick this one?
We've gone further than Dag Blamit this time. We've got some really entertaining sanitations in this one. For starters, Chick is a absolute grade A student who these two kids are desperately trying to seduce in the novel. Or rather, they're desperately trying to, get to second base with her, or whatever's harmless in those days. First base with this kid. But it's not their little meth lab in the book, is they are trying to invent a substance that smells like roses. So they've all gathered together to smell this substance that smells like roses. Because I've got to imagine that Les Martin got this script and thought, hell, how can I do the meth lab scene?
Because the meth lab bit makes a lot more sense in terms of why they would be there in the first place.
And it should also be noted that the club-tailed dragonfly line, where Berenbaum examines the impressive genitalia of the cockroach, is the insect's impressive musculature, was my other favourite one. Muscles, those things insects don't have, but this one have very impressive musculature.
I do like in this episode, weirdly enough, it's the look of what Scully does on her days off is quite interesting.
Cleans her gun and washes her dog.
Well, yeah, this is Scully now, apparently, because she's cleaning her gun, she's washing the dog, she's watching something on TV at one point.
And reading Breakfast at Tiffany's.
And at some point you want to say, how long has this evening been where you've done all these chores? Because, I don't know about you, but one of those activities would be, that's the evening chore, and then you do something else, isn't it?
Mm.
And do all of these in one night. I mean, it's a nice touch to sort of see that Scully does have a life outside of the X-Files. Although, again, Scully hasn't had a date since Boobfoot, and I don't think
she's obvious from this episode holding a candle for Mulder.
She is. Very territorial over Dr. Berenbaum. I like also like the sort of her expression when she pulls up and says, "Oh, Fox told me to wait here." Oh, of course he did. Okay, so that's kind of a red flag for Scully.
Someone calling him Fox.
Yeah, or the fact that he sort of told her to call him Fox.
I believe the previous indications that nobody but his mom calls him Fox.
Well, allegedly it was not even my parents called him Fox, but
yeah.
Mrs. Mulder didn't get that memo, and she always calls him Fox. I think his dad does too, to be honest. I think it's just posing by Mulder.
The reading of Breakfast at Tiffany's as well is apparently a reference to David Duchovny being on Celebrity Jeopardy. Is he got to the final Jeopardy question and it was a question about Breakfast at Tiffany's and he got it wrong.
Well, it's also worth noting that hang on to the author of Breakfast at Tiffany's, Truman Capote, because he's oddly going to become relevant later on.
Interestingly, so is Jeopardy. In the same episode.
Oh my god, yes.
So
wow,
give us a couple of episodes and we'll get back to that one.
Yeah, this is all set up for the next one. Anyway, we should probably talk more about the actual comedy elements of the episode, because I mean, there's a certain amount of comedy just with how Mulder and Scully are talking to each other.
This is probably our third purely comedic episode now, after Humbug and Clyde Bruckman.
Yes, and this one's a lot more upbeat than Clyde Bruckman. This doesn't have the really dour edge to it.
It's not as tongue-in-cheek as Humbug even, either.
No.
This one is... I think a lot more people die in this episode, but it's quite comedic.
Yeah, and it's also... It feels like it's more orchestrated to sort of just make fun of Mulder in a kind of mild way. But we've got weird gags like Mulder breaks into the government facility, and then the walls start moving, and he then the bugs everywhere. Then he sort of does the little yelp and everything. He says, "Well, Mulder, what happened?" It's like, "Oh, my torch went out."
I love all the times when Scully's panicking in the episode and he just hangs up on her. And you see nice things like the bit where she's fallen asleep, still holding the phone, so she can answer right away.
Again, it's I think it reminds me a bit of Rocky Horror Picture Show, where if you watch the film with the right mindset, you start thinking, how long has this night gone on for? Because you've packed a lot of stuff into it might be an hour and a half film, but it feels like these events should take place for 8 hours, and Coprophages has a similar kind of feel to it.
I like the build-up in this episode of the paranoia. It's kind of slow at first, but over the course of a few hours leads to this kind of rioting in the convenience store. But your first kind of indications of it are, if we discount Eckel, who's panicking about cockroaches before there's any problem with cockroaches, is you get the scientist, the pathologist, who interestingly is played by Chuck again, who starts asking if he should get his family out of the town and being quite distressed about this. It should be noticed that's another sanitization in the book of he doesn't die in the toilet, his death is caused by his stress levels because he's so worried about his family.
I do wonder, and it's very plausible at this point, is that Chuck was never meant to be a recurring character. He's meant to be a one-off for Kalashari. And that's why he's got this role here without his glasses on. Because again, he was in Jersey Devil originally, wasn't he?
Yeah.
It's really odd just to chart this guy's sort of appearances where he's played a few different characters and keeps coming back to the same one.
What's kind of neat is a lot of our raising paranoia levels come from like things you see on TV and conversations overheld, where it goes from being some kind of deadly cockroach to them believing that the cockroaches carry Ebola and things like that, and just escalating through the night.
Well, also the fact, though, that that's Mulder's fault, because it's the conversation he's having with the sheriff when the nurse walks in, gives him a look and walks back out again.
Yeah.
It's actually all Mulder's fault.
It's kind of, though, a bit like what Scully has warned him will happen in previous episodes, because you had that idea with the Ebola-like virus that was supposedly around in 731.
Epimasculata.
And you also had Epimasculata, yeah, where Mulder was determined to get this out and Scully was saying, what chaos will the mass hysteria cause? More people will die because of it. Which is what we see here, is people dying due to mass hysteria.
Yeah, you kind of want Scully to sort of just casually bring this up. You know, just... I want, in a future episode, I would just say, Miller's Grove, Mulder. Miller's Grove. And go, oh yeah.
Hey Mulder, remember in Epimasculata? Remember what I told you would happen if you stoke this mass hysteria? Miller's Grove, Mulder.
And this is where you see chocolates as cockroaches.
Oh, they're like junior mints, aren't they, that they knock off?
Yeah, the roaches. Everyone panics and flees.
We don't have junior mints in the UK, so if it's a different kind of chocolate, I apologise. It looks like that kind of thing.
Or Maltesers. It's something small.
Milk duds, something round and...
something that will roll.
Yeah.
I did think one of the interesting points, and it's one of those ones that kind of works against Mulder's normal worldview, is when he first calls Scully, he says, you know, we've had reports of these cockroach attacks, and these have come from legitimate scientists, like an alternate fuel researcher who ultimately is the paranoid maniac who has imported the dung, which is causing all the problems. And I can't remember what the other one he was. But it's that reverse of the normal thing of you don't believe the UFO or alien sighter because they're, you know, some sanitation worker or something, or They've
Something
done
you would consider low. A
Yeah.
farmer. They're often farmers and things, aren't they?
Or they're Seth Green and he's been in the Air Force Base smoking weed for the
Yeah.
evening and just enjoying the light show.
Someone blue collar.
Yeah, and instead, so you've got scientists as witnesses, and ultimately they succumb to the exact same problem everyone else does, which is the mass hysteria.
In the case of him, stoked by the fact that he's evidently afraid of cockroaches to begin with.
Yeah, and had no idea that his manure samples were so tainted as they were. I did notice a weird thing in the version we've got that seems to be missing from the original broadcast version. Is when Mulder picks up the cockroach to say, "Welcome to planet Earth."
Yeah.
In the original broadcast, there was a special effect which was a cockroach shadow going across the screen from like top right to bottom left.
Oh, I remember that. It crawls across the screen.
Was that in the version we watched or not? I don't think it was.
I don't recall. I remember it being in the TV version when I was younger.
I think it's one of these effects they couldn't replicate when they sort of blow them up to high def. Because apparently Baywatch, weirdly, is infamous for there's a whole load of shots they've just not even tried to replicate. But so that was meant to be the weird thing. The first time I watched it on videotape was because if you rewind a second, it's still doing it. It's not a cockroach crawling on the inside of the TV.
It's a bit like Eternal Darkness, the
Yeah.
game on the GameCube that had all of the little glitches and effects that were supposed to make you question your sanity, but one of them was sometimes a fly that landed on the screen. And so many times I tried to brush that little fly away and you realise it's actually in the game. The time that it tells you your memory card's corrupted.
Yeah, or there's a knock on the door. And you know they're coming, and things like the mute sign, though, when it comes up is, that's not the TV interface. But you forget about that in a moment and go, oh, where's the remote? Who stood on it?
Yeah, I almost threw my console when it told me that my memory card had been corrupted. It's a clever idea that you don't see in games, really, before or since.
No, nothing quite that level.
That's like the idea with this cockroach. It's that thing to make you jump and think there's an actual roach on your screen.
The robots are cute,
Oh, the one that likes Mulder.
though. No, we just like you.
It's so sweet when Mulder's being followed around by the little... But again, to emphasise the fact that when Mulder shows him this leg and says, oh, can you analyse it? It's like, Mulder, that's nothing like that.
No.
Kind of 3-foot-long robot that's following you around.
Then it's sort of scientist so shaky he starts drinking whiskey with Mulder in what must be like 2 a.m. by this point.
I think you would be if you've suddenly seen this technology that doesn't exist on Earth. This is, again, the day the Earth stood still level revelations.
But again, we don't do anything with it. You've got plausible evidence of either some ultra secretive robot technology or extraterrestrial probes, and we're just not going to let that slide, apparently.
Would you be satisfied with the answer?
I wouldn't, it's true.
That's part of the fun, isn't it?
It is part of the fun. But it's one of those bits of evidence that they have and they just discard.
To be fair, it's because it degrades. Because at the end of the episode, Dr. Ivanova asks for the sample and Mulder says, oh, it's just kind of decomposed to just base metals that exist on Earth.
Do everything else for War of the Coprophages.
No, I think that's everything. I got a lovely, funny episode. Probably didn't enjoy it as much as Clyde Bruckman, but it's still tons of fun and had bugs in it, so it's therefore one of the best episodes of The X-Files.
That's fair. I mean, I think I would agree. It's not on the same level as Clyde Bruckman. It's very funny, but you do kind of feel that, I don't know, it could have gone further at some points or really leaned into some things.
I think I'll go even further to say that it's probably my least favourite Darin Morgan episode, but that still puts it way above some of the other ones, because I still really like Humbug as well. So far, I think I'd rank them Clyde Bruckman, Humbug, and then Coprophages.
It's still fun. I mean, it's still fun to see Mulder's belief system taken to task properly for the first time with the whole, yeah, Mulder, have you thought of these 500 alternate explanations for the weirdness you keep on using as proof of aliens?
I think as well as how easily Scully can disprove Mulder's irrational belief by proxy when she's not even there.
I know,
it's like that. Mulder, have you examined his eye? Is it bloodshot? Yeah, it's an aneurysm.
Oh, okay, then that's made me realise we have inverted the normal way of things. Scully is now Sherlock Holmes.
True.
In this episode.
Mulder is our Watson.
Watson is now...
Except for the fact that Watson is still the medical doctor.
True, but in terms of she deduces... This is like the BBC Moffat Sherlock Holmes, where he deduces that whole stupid boomerang thing without even seeing the scene.
Mm.
So this is it done in the 90s, purely on medical know-how. And it's very impressive for Scully that she can sort these things within 2 lines of dialogue. Like, go Scully.
Yeah.
But anyway, next week we have Syzygy, something. I don't know how you pronounce it.
And grotesque.
Syzygy with Ryan Reynolds as a guest star, and blink and you'll miss him. That's not actually a joke, really, is it?
No. So that's 2 more Monster of the Week episodes.
And grotesque.
It's the one with the sculptures.
I know it's one with the sculptures. If you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can also contact us via our social media. On Tumblr and Twitter, we are GetStrange42. On Mastodon, we are at GetStrange42 at universadon.com. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast.
We have a Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where we are doing the original X-Files game Let's Play. That's the FMV game from the 90s. We've got episode 1 already up there, and episode 2 should be coming shortly.
There are 3 different tiers that you can follow us on Patreon. They're all different prices and have different perks to them, but at any level, you will gain access to the Let's Play.
Our theme music is envisioned by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next week, remember,
Got to come full circle to find the truth.